This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I was about to say welcome to 2018, but that was last week, right? But I guess we're still probably writing 2017 on like checks, whoever writes checks anymore, or like your homework, or I don't know. Where do people write dates? Anyways, the guest this week is Mr. Nicky Money from the band Nothing, from Death to Lovers. He also played in a great hardcore band called Horror Show. And this episode has been a long time in the making, in my head at least, because I've always admired what he's done musically. He seems like a very creative individual, a guy that's had a lot of turmoil in his life. But throughout it all, he's always been able to, I was about to say come out ahead, but, you know, that's maybe debatable. But he's always been able to, put amazing art in the world. And I respect that, because it's difficult to expose yourself and to put yourself out there. And so the fact that Nick is very open about not only his past, but his struggles that he goes through, and just kind of everything, and it's all put out there. I can't help but admire that. So that's what we got for that. Visit noecho.net, please. I know I tell you every episode, but some of you are not doing that, and I'm pointing at you. I'm talking to you. Visit the website. They have great content from a punk hardcore metal perspective. Photographer spotlights, vinyl collector spotlights, just a lot of cool articles, I guess, about independent music. So you should get into it. And what else do I got to tell you? My life is good. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Been doing a lot of traveling recently. The Taken shows. I didn't tell you about those because I was supposed to put out a bonus episode, and I did not. I did not do that. But the Taken shows were spectacular in Canada last month, and I'm going to be gearing up to doing some more and releasing our new EP, and I'm very excited about that. I'll play you some music at some point for those of you that I actually met up in Canada when we played the shows, and we're like, hey, I just came to the show because I really like your podcast. It's like, wow, that rules, man. Thank you very much. So, that's that. I'm moving into my new house finally in the next couple weeks, and I've been living with my parents for well over a year, and I love them to death, but holy crap, it gets a little tiring. Like right now, I'm recording in the living room because no one is here, and you're just living on top of each other constantly, and that's hard after a while. So I'm very excited to be in the new space shortly, and like I said, Nicky was just a great guest, and this conversation is extremely loose. I know that most of these are just conversations, and obviously not scripted in any capacity. But Nicky was hanging out with his friends at a bar. I know that's going to sound like, oh my gosh, like this conversation could be terrible. You're going to hear a bunch of crazy people in the background, and you do hear a little bit of that. But Nicky was super focused and wanting to hang out and talk with me, and I really appreciated that because, he could have just been hanging out with friends, drinking and shooting pool, but he didn't do that. So, he did do that, but not when we were discussing. So, thank you very much, Nicky, and I also want to thank out. That's a new word, right? Thank out. I want to thank my friend Stephanie, who does his PR and has worked with him for a while on various projects. Thank you to Stephanie for hooking us up. Anyways, here is my discussion with Nicky. All right? Get excited. Woo-hoo! And I definitely got keyed into you when you obviously were playing in a horror show, and it seemed to me that the style of music that you guys were doing, was definitely reminiscent of the time in regards to other bands like American Nightmare, Panic, and all that sort of stuff. Did you ever feel like you kind of fit in with that scene, or were you guys just kind of like the weird band from Philly that did this sort of weird aggressive hardcore?
Well, I mean, I was super close with all those guys at the time. Like at that time that Gibby from Panic was throwing he was starting to get into like DJing and throwing parties up in Boston all the time. And Wes was like, like starting to come out of his shell a bit more because he was, he's in a popular band, and it was a strange time. There was like Makeout Club and all that shit going on at that point, and like these dudes were having like great parties. It was like all dudes that were in the hardcore, but were also into like New Order, Joy Division, and like Smiths and all this stuff. So like we all like kind of linked, and at that point, like I was living in Philly, but I was real close with them. So like I would bring up like 100 pills of ecstasy from Philly up to Boston, and like sell all ecstasy to everybody, and then we would just like while out for like 4 days, and then I would go back down to Philly, and we became really close. So like that was like for sure, like it was like Panic American Nightmare Horror Show, or like three, like a a triple threat kind of, like
right.
we were for at one point, like I felt, it was pretty like the most comfortable I ever felt, like, with being around people. Everyone was so uptight until that point, and I finally found some people that like, I felt like I can completely be myself around and stuff, and
No, that's.
And then there was lots of drugs involved as well. Plus, on the back end, we're talking about like 2000, 2001, and I'm getting ready. Like I was already sentenced at that point for prison for 2002. So everything felt like it was literally like a day-to-day thing, and I never really knew how like the night was going to end or anything. So it was pretty poetic in that form,
Yeah, no, I really like that depiction, because it was. I didn't really reflect on it as such, but it was a weird time for these people who were ostensibly, just weirdos in their high school to all of a sudden have kind of, national attention playing in a band, and then to be also kind of popular in this different, scene.
Yeah, it was new. It was new for all of us, for sure. And and those guys really liked all those Philly guys that were coming up there at that point, because a lot of these kids were like suburban kids, and we were like, the kind of like leatherneck, like kind of like rough around the edges kind of guys, always getting into trouble, always fighting and stuff. And so like we got up there, it was really cool for us Philly guys. So it started with me, and then it was like me and Bushy, and then a couple other guys like came up, and by the end I was bringing like carloads of Philly guys up to Boston all the time, and we were just like partying pretty much, and it was a interesting time. But also, like I said, having that in the background, in the shadows, lurking, knowing that ticking clock was coming, where I was going to have to turn myself in. It was just like a lot to deal with. Like a lot of nights went from being like really fun to turning really dark by the end of by the morning hours,
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, because you were on borrowed time. You were just like, well, I got to have fun, but then the reality sets in, and you're just like, shit, I got to do this thing.
Yeah, it never really left my train of thought very often at times, but it was fleeting, but it always, got its way back into my head for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of reflecting on you yourself, were you born and raised in Philly, or where did you come up?
Yeah, I grew up in like North Philly. Like I lived in Frankfurt for a while. I lived in Wissinoming a long time. I lived in Kensington for a while. So but yeah, like center, like the middle, actual Philadelphia. That term gets thrown around pretty loose, as you can imagine. But
yeah, well, especially all the people that live in Doylestown are like, oh yeah, we're from Philly. It's like, well, yeah, no, you're not.
No, I'm an extreme advocate of making sure that people know that I'm actually from Philly. I guess that's just it's a really dumb thing to really, make a point, but it always has been for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Especially too, because it's easy for people to rep a certain city when they're just close to it. And it's like, well, you don't actually have the experience of what it's like to be raised in this city.
Yeah. There's like it's everyone has their own thing growing up, and obviously there's people that have insane upbringings in any kind of environment, which I just never understood why people weren't just like more open about like where they came from, because it doesn't really matter where the fuck you're coming from. because you could have any kind of fucking problem wherever the fuck you're at. You know what I mean? But I just, it always bothered me. I don't know why. Probably just easily bothered.
And so, kind of on that same tip, the your upbringing in the city, like, what was your family structure like? Like, I know you were estranged from your father for a little bit, but like, were mom and dad in the house initially, and like, do you have brothers and sisters?
I mean, I don't really recall much time of my dad being around. It was more along the lines of when he was coming back, trying to sort shit out that he fucked up before, that we really started to become a relationship. And by that point, I was just like a fucking piece of shit maniac.
Right.
That was a complete accident, so don't even fucking try that. The one was, not the other one. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Sorry, my friends are playing pool at this bar.
No worries.
And, but yeah, I mean, that was a good shot. The most memories I have from him, like around that time, I was only like 7 or 8 years old. And it was like, him like fucking chasing my family around the house, like with a belt and shit, like typical, like lower middle class, like blue collar family.
Right.
Abuse. It doesn't really tend to happen as much as it does these days, as it used to in like the 80s and stuff. But, it was basically like just my mom holding shit down, working a couple jobs, and then her, dealing with like 3 kids that were just like on like their own separate destruction path, pretty much. Maybe in like the baby out of the 3.
Right. And so you had 2 older brothers, or brother sister?
I had an older brother and an older sister.
Got it.
Sunday was the metalhead, and Jesse was the ever blossoming punk skinhead, hardcore, and eventual like indie slow dive fucking guy.
Right.
He went the whole route. So
right. Well,
yeah, I mean, it was always just like all 3 of us just going in 3 lightning bolts. Just like my mom trying to hold shit down, and
right.
Well, never will have a kid for sure, because I know that I'm in a world of payback coming my way.
Right. It's I find it interesting that all of your siblings, like you said, were all into their own areas of subculture and music. So like, I guess everybody just kind of got into it like on their own, with other friends kind of influencing them.
Well, my mom was definitely a really big influence on all of us, like artistically. And my dad, when he was around, was too, in his own way. He kind of gave us our style, and my mom kind of gave us like a little bit more intelligence than he had to offer. My dad was kind of like, OG wannabe black guy. He worked in an all black union, drove around in a giant Lincoln, dressed super fly, always spent his money on jewelry, doing a lot of illegal shit, hanging around the neighborhood, listening to old soul and old funk, like.
Yeah.
And then my mom was the exact opposite. My mom was like a hippie beatnik in the 60s, like loves like poetry and folk music, but also like was like got into in the 80s, got into like a lot of like post-punk stuff, like Susie and Cocteau Twins and like The Cure. So like, it was very well-rounded, and out of that, like my sister found metalheads that she kind of met up with, and Jesse kind of got her into some like cooler metal stuff, and then Jesse kind of really led the way as far as like the musical taste went. I mean, that's where I got a lot of my stuff from, between him and my mom.
Got it. And at any point did you kind of, I mean, like you said, your father was into, weird illegal stuff. Like, did you ever think the stuff that he was doing was cool, or was it always just like you were too young to understand it?
I'm sorry, can you kind of broke up a tiny bit right there.
No, it's okay. I was saying, your father was, like you mentioned, into some, weird stuff, weird illegal stuff. Did you ever, I guess, kind of like look up to him in a way, or were you too young to recognize that?
No, it took me a while before I even knew that shit was going on. Like, you know, when I was a teenager, my mom would kind of indulge me a little bit more into what like stuff he was doing. I mean, it's obvious now. I know what the union dudes were up to at that point. You know, especially like the labor union where he was. It was like in the 70s and the 80s was like an insanely like enterprising criminal. You know, underworld. You know, they were doing a lot of illegal shit. You know, there were feds who would come to our house all the time, way after he was already gone, like out with like this new lady that he was with. You know, and you know, Fed guys would come to the door, and there would be two guys in suits. I would never know what was going on, but it wasn't until later on where my mom would be like, "Yeah, Fed guys would come in the house, ask us questions. They would ask crazy questions like about like Jimmy Hoffa and stuff like that. They were just like, you know, they were just like they're harassing us basically. They thought that we were hiding him, and he was really just gone.
Right.
And you know, they just would come around, and my mom would just be like, kind of just like, fuck off, get out of here. Like, what do you want to know? I'm not going to talk to you, like type shit. Like some like shitty Goodfellas, like one of these shit.
Right.
You know?
Did you ever, like you said, I guess at what age did you find yourself looking back on that being like, holy shit, like that was a real unstable environment?
I mean, I don't know, man. Like everyone I grew up with is like kind of was in the same boat, so it never really seemed too weird. I mean, it wasn't until like way later until I realized, like, you know, like being around other people that had like significantly way more normal lives, where I was like, oh, well. And by that point, I was completely super comfortable with myself and who I was at that. You know, yeah. I never really had like an embarrassment point where I was like, oh God, like, you know, like I always like embraced it rather than like. Was like, because it was of the norm, you know, like actually like I felt like my scenario was like way less crazy than some of my friends' scenarios, you know, friends that I don't even see around that aren't around anymore. Like, you know,
yeah,
mine seemed mild and tame compared to like some of the people that I started to be around and like, you know,
yeah, I guess,
and it still does seem mildly tame to most of them, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it's not until I'm around like some real like normies that I can fucking, you know.
Right, reflect on that, yeah.
Yeah.
iHeartRadio and Grim and Mild present Bridgewater Season 2.
A lot of people now actually believe that there is some kind of mystical force in this region that attracts monsters and paranormal activity.
The Bridgewater Triangle. Now, that sounds about right.
You're still denying that there's something beyond our understanding going on here?
Starring Supernatural's Misha Collins, The Walking Dead's Melissa Ponzio, and Rogue One's Alan Tudyk. Written by Lauren Shippen and created by me, Aaron Mahnke.
Something about all of this doesn't feel right.
Hello? Is someone there?
Something went wrong here.
Olivia, we should hurry.
We have a much bigger problem.
What is that?
Olivia, run!
Listen to Bridgewater now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And learn more over at grimandmild.com/Bridgewater.
What's up? It's Angela Yee, and I want to tell you about my podcast, Lip Service. I created Lip Service as a safe space for women to talk about whatever they want to when it comes to the bedroom with no judgment. Lip Service means fun conversations and the freedom to talk about whatever you want. Lip Service is the one place where you can hear artists talk about the intimate details of their life and subjects that you might not hear anywhere else. It's where Nick Cannon felt safe enough to open up about some controversial topics with his love life.
The stork is on the way. You know, there's a lot of kids last year.
Oh my God. Also, Lizzo sat down and discussed dating. This was before she was in a relationship.
Oh, we never spoke after that, though.
We want to know why.
Okay, listen.
And even Cardi B came on recently, where she had a great time talking about life before her marriage to Offset.
I thought you wanted a bad and bougie. You got a bad and ghetto.
Make sure you check out my podcast, Lip Service, on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you crave a good mystery? Tune in to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio podcast, featuring episodes of different detective dramas from the golden age of radio every day, Monday through Saturday. The lineup of radio detectives currently includes Sam Spade, Dr. Tim Detective, Dangerous Assignment, Philo Vance, yours truly Johnny Dollar, and Tales of the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Adam Graham, and I offer commentary and humor after each episode, and also respond to your questions and feedback. Enjoy a good mystery before bed, while driving, or whenever you crave old school radio goodness. Listen to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
So as you started to develop your own identity, once you got into high school and stuff like that, you've always struck me as a pretty friendly dude. But then also, you had the violence that kind of surrounded you. So what kind of kid did you find yourself being? Like, did you have a short temper, or were you just like, no, man, I'm cool with most people as long as they don't push me?
I mean, a lot of this stemmed from I was a really peaceful human being for like the longest time. And, besides being like a troublemaker, like a deviant kind of, I never was violent by any means. And then my mom, she moved out of like Frankfurt and up to the Northeast, and she tried to move me to reintroduced me to like a Catholic school after like 6 years or whatever of not being in any schooling like that. I was in Catholic school for a year and a half, and I got like hit by a car, and they wouldn't help with tuition, so they took me out. My mom like wrote off religion in the family, basically, like very openly. Was just like, don't believe these people, they're not here to help us, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to help ourselves, like, you're here to work, like that's how you make things happen. It's a type of thing. So she tried to reintroduce me to the Catholic school in like freshman year in high school, and I lasted like 2 months before I got kicked out. I was getting beat up like every other day by like these bro dudes, like nicknames, like literally we could walk to the bus stop. If I happened to start to win one fight with one of them, they would just jump me. It was literally like torture, honestly.
That's awful. Were they just fucking with you based on the fact that they just I
mean, I was a punk kid. I was like,
okay,
I was like patches on my school bag and stuff, and
right.
Just like bullshit, and just like normal, typical shit. And this part of Philly is is like not even from the neighborhood. They found out I was like from down there originally, so they would call me like, dirtbag, like white trash, all this bullshit,
Right.
So I was just fighting with those kids all the time, and I finally just like lost it one time and like got kicked out. Got sent to Frankfurt High School, which I wanted to go. That's where all the people I knew were. That's like it's like a 80% black school, but like, that's like where everyone in my neighborhood was going. So I got my way and ended up back down in Frankfurt, and lo and behold, I barely got in any trouble down there. But I think that little bit of time really did have some sort of effect on me, because it was like right after that point where I started to, I had never really been in a fight before until then. And then all of a sudden, like, anytime I felt like I was pushing, I was like, wow, I was around a bunch of kids now that were ready to do this all the time, whenever, and it just became accustomed to seem like the way to answer any kind of problem,
Right. Yeah. Well, especially too, where it's like, if you basically go in a sort of a defensive state of mind, it's hard to get out of that, even if you're in a different environment.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. So, like you said, you bounce around at schools and stuff like that. Did you ever, I guess, kind of like care about school, or the idea of like, oh, I'm going to get a job and that sort of stuff? Or was that just kind of like, whatever, I'm just biding my time?
Yeah, I mean, I literally I've never been a planner till I think it was post prison. It was like where I started to like even divulge into like anything more than what was going to be like till the next day, I was pretty just like self-indulgent and not really not really planning for much than what was going on right at the single moment. So
Got it. So yeah, I guess in many ways, and I think a lot of people have spoken to you about this before. Going away for those 2 years gave you a kind of a renewed purpose in a way. Yeah.
I mean, initially, no. I came home with like most dudes do, come home from prison with a pretty big chip on their shoulder. And I immediately came home and started, I got back into like selling coke and stuff around Philly, like clockwork. Immediately on parole with like 5 years behind me. Like if I get caught, I'm going back to jail to serve 5 years, and I just still was just out there, still acting like a knucklehead pretty much. And I don't know what it was. I mean, it was like a couple years down the line, I just like had like some sort of realization. I was like, man, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this isn't even you. This isn't even what you've ever been about. Like you need to like straighten up. Like you're going to be back in there again. And I kind of did slowly but surely. It wasn't like an overnight thing, but
right.
I saw one thing. It was like I stopped like just like letting myself be so. I can't think of the word right now. I mean, just so loose, pretty much, and just acting on whatever emotion I felt immediately without like thinking about anything, and that was
Sure.
all my decision making was just like, very fast and very emotional. Yeah,
you're acting on impulse.
Yeah, exactly. It was very impulsive behavior. That's the word I was searching for.
Yeah.
So I had a few beers already today. So
No, you're good, man. You're good. And so I guess what started to attract you to like punk and hardcore? Was it just basically kind of the community and energy behind it, or was it just the other aspects of it, like the DIY mentality and all that sort of stuff?
I mean, originally was just straight up just the fact that that's what all my friends were into, and the music seemed right, like it fit, like it fit the soundtrack for everything that was going on, so vivid and perfect, and I just loved being around like my friends pretty much, and it never seemed like it was going to end ever, and the music, and then, even when we started visiting, like when we managed to like get out of the neighborhood and started to go downtown to like, when there were where like most of the real punk shows were happening in like West Philly, and like, we suddenly realized pretty fast that it wasn't going to be like a community thing like that. Like we were going to meet these people and it was going to be like, oh yeah, these are people just like us too. It was like we get down there and we find like that there's like a lot of punk kids that are not like us at all and like way more civilized and like,
right.
And better school, better parented, and came from better places, and didn't act like savages, did terrible things too, but like in different ways than us, so as you can imagine, it's like it wasn't long before like we started getting into like trouble with even those people from the scene in Philadelphia.
Right. And when did it kind of, because Horror Show was ostensibly your first band, right? Like, or did you have other stuff you did before?
I had like some shitty punk bands from before that I played like guitar for and stuff, but it was like really nothing to mention.
Yeah, like I mean, did you start playing shows with those previous bands too and stuff?
We played a couple shows like in the neighborhood in Kensington and stuff like that, like some shows that like Joe Hardcore was putting on early on.
Sure.
Before he even knew anybody in the city either, and it was just like a bunch of like bands from the neighborhood, but they were like really like entry level like punk band kind of things, like there was like your typical like oi band that were like just like all the songs were about drinking beers at this bar that we all like used to hang out and like try to get 40s and like typical shit, but like in inner city, obviously North Philly, like punk kids, I guess,
Right.
And then we get downtown and it's like people are taking punk and, there's a lot of shit that we didn't know about that we were rolling in at like 14 years old,
Sure. And why did you pick up guitar initially? Was that just like convenient?
My brother played, so he used to teach me like fucking Minor Threat songs and stuff and like Misfits. I think I knew how to play like 4 Misfit songs. And at the same time, I was still listening to like fucking like Oasis was coming out at that point, and like all like some of the grunge stuff I was like still kind of into,
Right. Which is I love that time in people's music lives where you don't have to listen to a music because it's cool. You just listen to it because you like it. It's like, I like Oasis and I like this thing. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's all music.
Like they had no idea of like what came with any of the music besides listening to it on a stereo. Like I had no idea till later on that like I had to hide the fact that the punk kids that I was loved Green Day for a while. I was like, I can't tell anybody this. They fucking think I'm a joke, And it's until you get to a certain point, you're like, oh, fuck everybody. Everyone sucks. And everyone was listening to embarrassing shit when they were fucking 13 and 14,
Yeah, exactly. It's like that doesn't matter, man. I don't need to hide this from anybody.
It is though. It takes a while to realize that you gotta keep that shit in the closet.
Totally. Yeah, you're like, I can't. I'm listening to this on my own time.
Yeah, it's funny being embarrassed about Oasis and then you look and see what's going on now.
Yeah, exactly.
Suck, man.
And so as you started to, play in horror show and kind of, get out and tour a little bit, did you like, I guess, that touring lifestyle, or was that something that, you only liked in small doses?
Well, Harzer never really did much touring. I mean, we never even made it to the West Coast.
Right. Like on the East Coast, yeah.
Yeah, and like, I mean, it was literally this, like, at that point, like, the way I look at this shit, like, now, like, almost business-like, then it was like, everybody tried to jam in the van. We're not even going to bring equipment. Like, we're going to use everyone else's shit. We're not going to even ask till we get there. We're going to fill up the van with as many people as we possibly can, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And we're going to drive down to Richmond. We're going to play a show, and all of us are going to fight the whole entire time horror show's playing, and then we're going to go home. And that was basically like the whole thing.
Right.
or maybe not even get in a fight. It wasn't always like about fighting either. I don't want to paint the wrong picture, but like, I mean, that's what it was. Put a ton of fucking kids in the van and just fucking go, and
Yeah. No, it's true, especially when it's like
stealing food at every rest stop, like just like dirty ass little
degenerates
kids, yeah, pretty much.
And what, like, as you started to, like you said, just whatever, get out and play a few shows here and there. Was that kind of like, I gotta figure out a way to like do this more? Prior to the jail sentence looming in your life, was it like, I gotta play in bands?
Nah, man, it was never like that at all. It honestly was like, I really started to enjoy playing music, but my mind was not at all focused on any of that shit. It was strictly about like what I was about to try to get myself into, and if I was going to make it or not. And that weighed heavy, the heaviest. So it was hard to think of anything. I mean, I still was making music. I still was designing everything and writing most of the stuff with Josh, who passed away later on. And that was it. Like, it was just like, it was like part-time. And it was it means a lot now, but at the time it was just like another thing. It was like a form of expression to say, it was a way for me to let things out. And, I mean, I was going through things that, it's tough thing for a 19-year-old kid, an 18-year-old kid to swallow,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were dealing with adult shit when you weren't prepared to deal with that at all.
Yeah. I couldn't even drink in a bar yet.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go to prison with a bunch of men,
Right.
It wasn't easy for sure.
Yeah. And kind of speaking of that, was it, I'm going to kind of presume that your method of survival once you were in prison is basically just kind of keep your head down and keep to yourself, or, how did you, I guess, preserve yourself?
You'd think that would be the move, right?
Yeah.
for a smart person. Maybe.
Okay, sorry, my fault. So what did you do?
I started that way. The second I got to Camden County, and I'd always tell this story where they put you in like a 7-day lockdown. I won't get into this because I could go on for a really long time.
No, yeah. The mode of survival is what I'm most interested in. That's all.
I walked in there. They put you in a 7-day quarantine when you're first in there in case you're like dope sick or anything or had the flu. So the first night, I ate a bunch of Xanax and shit before I went in. Kind of with the intentions of like, well, if I wake up from this, that's I wake up. If I don't, fuck it, too,
Right.
So I woke up to like the sound of like a kid screaming, crying. It felt like it was going on for so long before I actually could open my eyes and wake up. And it went on for hours, man. And I was just sitting in this cell by myself, like cold as fuck. It was winter. It was November, so it was pretty fucking cold in Camden. And just listening to this kid crying and screaming, like, why am I in here? Like, someone help me, all this shit. So I asked the CEO later on, like, what had happened with that kid. And I found out that he was out one night, like, looking for his girlfriend, like, and he smoked a bunch of, like, wet. He was an 18-year-old kid, smoked a bunch of wet. Seen his girlfriend talking to some dude out front of a club and walked up to a kid and shot the kid in the head.
Oh.
And it wound up being the girl's cousin. And, they locked him up that night and he fucking woke up like when he sobered up, I guess, and had no idea what he even did. And I was just like, man, what the fuck? And this is like my introduction to this shit. And then, I got put in the general population with like the worst block because my crime was like a violent crime, so I got stuck in with violent offenders, as I should. It's like, you want to fucking do this shit, like you better grow up and this is where you're going to be, And the first night I slept in there, I woke up, my shoes were gone. I walked out of my cell, and there's a Puerto Rican dude standing with like 4 other Puerto Rican dudes on the other end of the jail, just wearing my shoes, just like politicking, like nothing was really going on.
Right. And
I walked over to him. I'm like, yo, man, I think you got my shoes on. He's like, I think you got your what? I'm like, I think you got my shoes on. He's like, all right, well, come in my cell. Let's talk about it. So I already knew what it was. So boom, boom, boom. I get beat up. I go back to my cell. They call a count. Just the CEO comes and looks in the window. I'm like kind of hiding my face because it's like lumped up. They open the cells again. I go back over to them to try to get my shoes again. They're about to beat me up again. And like some of their old head guys came over and were like, look, you're causing too much heat over here. Give the kid his shoes back. So they gave him my shoes back. But then like I had like beef with these, like the younger guys, like the whole time I was in Camden County. So I was like fighting like every other day in there for like 3 months until I got moved to like actual prison. But, in actual prison, it was like way, way easier. Like people were way more chilled out. Like a lot of people were like working towards getting like paroled and stuff. So I mean, I got in a couple things, but as I got more comfortable, I was just like in there, like like playing cards all the time, gambling. I got really into gambling, and I was good at playing cards. So I started to develop quite a like chest full of commissary.
Right, stuff to trade.
I'm sorry?
I said, yeah, right, like stuff to trade.
Yeah, so then I became like this dude that had a white kid that I had like a ton of shit. Like I had some respect in there because I wasn't afraid to fight or anything, but like I'm still by myself, not affiliated to anybody, and floating. So I would make some moves and kind of like grease the right people in the right places. I had like a pretty strong connect to this one CEO I knew that knew somebody on the outside. So like when I was going outside details to do shit, like he would let me sneak Burger King back in or McDonald's, and then I would always hit like the right people with like a burger here and there. So was a little bit of like, had to work it, you know what I mean? I wasn't in there like, you know, getting extorted, you know, like, but I had to grease the right people to like make myself be able to survive. Not even survive. Honestly, I was like living like in there. Like I had like everything I needed at one point. I was like the only dude on my tier that had a blanket and a radio. You know, people see that shit and they're like, what the fuck is this little white kid have all this shit for? I'm going to take this shit from them.
Right.
But I made it to where they really couldn't. So it was just like planning, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's when I really started to realize that like, if I'm using my brain a little bit more, I can kind of get shit done, and rather than being just like an emotional maniac.
iHeartRadio and Grim and Mild present Bridgewater Season 2.
A lot of people now actually believe that there is some kind of mystical force in this region that attracts monsters and paranormal activity.
The Bridgewater Triangle. Now, that sounds about right.
You're still denying that there's something beyond our understanding going on here?
Starring Supernatural's Misha Collins, The Walking Dead's Melissa Ponzio, and Rogue One's Alan Tudyk. Written by Lauren Shippen and created by me, Aaron Mahnke.
Something about all of this doesn't feel right.
Hello? Is someone there?
Something went wrong here.
Olivia, we should hurry.
We have a much bigger problem.
What is that?
Olivia, run!
Listen to Bridgewater now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And learn more over at grimandmild.com/Bridgewater.
What's up? It's Angela Yee, and I want to tell you about my podcast, Lip Service. I created Lip Service as a safe space for women to talk about whatever they want to when it comes to the bedroom with no judgment. Lip Service means fun conversations and the freedom to talk about whatever you want. Lip Service is the one place where you can hear artists talk about the intimate details of their life and subjects that you might not hear anywhere else. It's where Nick Cannon felt safe enough to open up about some controversial topics with his love life.
The stork is on the way. You know, there's a lot of kids last year.
Oh my God. Also, Lizzo sat down and discussed dating. This was before she was in a relationship.
Oh, we never spoke after that, though.
We want to know why.
Okay, listen.
And even Cardi B came on recently, where she had a great time talking about life before her marriage to Offset.
I thought you wanted a bad and bougie. You got a bad and got a...
Make sure you check out my podcast, Lip Service, on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you crave a good mystery? Tune in to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio podcast, featuring episodes of different detective dramas from the golden age of radio every day, Monday through Saturday. The lineup of radio detectives currently includes Sam Spade, Dr. Tim Detective, Dangerous Assignment, Philo Vance, yours truly Johnny Dollar, and Tales of the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Adam Graham, and I offer commentary and humor after each episode, and also respond to your questions and feedback. Enjoy a good mystery before bed, while driving, or whenever you crave old school radio goodness. Listen to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah, totally. Well, it sounds like too that, you know, you started to realize that like you had probably honestly value in a way where it's like, hey, like, yeah, I'm not just this, you know, degenerate. Like, yeah, I can be that, but like, I can also do shit if you put your mind to it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
That's sick. And it sounds like too, like, you know, from the way you've spoken about it in other interviews that, you know, music was definitely, you know, foundational and kind of a salvation for you in many respects. Was that true, or is that just kind of hyperbole?
Well, it was and it wasn't. It wasn't at first when I came home, because we did some horror show shoots and I came home and we had dreams of grandeur doing something like, you know, more along the lines of like what Nothing was doing with Josh. And then I had plans to move to LA in a couple years after I saved enough money. They went out. A couple of the guys from horror show went out to LA. I was lagging behind. I was trying to save more money because obviously it took me a little bit longer to find a job than everybody else had already been working and saving. And then Josh, who I used to write all the horror show songs, got killed in a motorcycle accident. And then my friend Stoney, who I grew up with, died got killed in a drunk driving accident as well, only a year later. So once again, I felt really stuck in Philly. Things got pretty hopeless, and music was definitely not in the options at this point anymore. I was like, I'm not going to do this without Josh, kind of thing, And, a lot of things happened, and I moved to LA, and I got out of a shitty relationship. I was off and on some drugs and kind of banged up in the world. Moved to LA, had a mental breakdown. And I just had an epiphany one night when that I needed to try play music again,
Yeah.
And that was it.
And how did your, as you were going through all this, this trauma, but then also, the weird music you were bringing home, and, how was your mom reacting to all this stuff? Like you said, she's kind of, your main support system. How was she reacting to this stuff as you were going through it?
Oh, man. She's happy for sure. It's the one thing I could take away from this whenever I'm even distraught with even the nothing stuff or anything else I'm doing. It's always nice to be the amount of stress I put on this poor woman in my life was turbulent, awful fucking up and down roller coaster I've made of myself in my life. It's nice to watch her be proud and see it your child doing something that makes you smile and stuff and happy. So that's one thing I can always take away from this, no matter how jaded I get about everything that I do.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And then, as you like you said, had the epiphany, and you started to realize hey, let's focus on making music. Clearly nothing started slow in regards to you were just kind of putting music out there with some friends. When did you kind of feel that it actually picked up momentum, where people recognized what you were doing?
I think after the relapse thing, I'm Guilty of Everything came out, where I was wow. I was I think this is actually something this could be important. By that point, I was managing 10 bars in Philadelphia. I had worked my way up from a busboy out of prison to a part owner in one of the bars, and managing 8 other ones for the owner, overseeing all of them. So I got over 12 years of doing that. I learned how to manage things pretty well, I think, as well as working in customer service. So learned how to swallow shit from idiots, a lot of things I learned from working in that fucking business. Also learned how to become a complete alcoholic as well, but what are you gonna do? Sure. Every job has its fucking downfalls, I guess. But
yep.
It made sense to me. I was finally after that record coming out, and there's more money and there's things moving. I'm okay, it's time that I need to really start to manage this. It's more work shit, and I did, and then all of a sudden I was wow, I'm going to quit working in these bars now and just try to do this full time while I can, so I can really focus on it. And then,
right.
6 years later,
there you go.
Here I am. I'm doing it, but pretty much right now with guys that I worked with in Philly, and I'm asking them if I might have to pick up a couple shifts because our record's taking so long to come out at this point.
Right.
So I might not be managing it all that well, but
that's okay. You got to fill in the gaps here and there. It happens.
Yeah.
Did you, like you said, as you started to, see that there was stuff happening on the business side of things, do you like dealing with the business side of music, or is that something that's just kind of a necessary evil?
I hate dealing with money. I usually pawn money off on like management at this point, but like we have management, but I still oversee everything because I'm a crazy person, and I never feel like anybody's doing as good a job as I would be doing.
Right.
It's probably a pretty awful trait, but I'm usually right about it though. Like I can't wait to be proven wrong one day. But yeah, I mean, I hate dealing with money, but I love dealing with like being in control of everything else that's going on as far as creativity and like who we're playing shows with and what the record's going to look like. And
right, like the creative stuff that's behind the band.
Yeah, and also like the creative marketing side of shit too. You know what I mean? It's not like I like marketing. I just hate dealing with money. Like I loved coming up with like the campaign for the Tired Tomorrow stuff. Like.
Right.
Like just like I love doing shit like that. It's like basic shit I was doing in the bars, like trying to get people in there. You know what I mean? It's just like an elevated version of that.
Yeah. Well, to me, I really liked. I love it too because I think it really embodies, kind of who you are as a person. Where it's like, yeah, you're always looking, you're looking at the devious side of things or being like, oh yeah, I want to ruffle some feathers. But you can do it where it's going to attract attention to your band. It's like, painting the roof of an abandoned building. Like that's pretty sick. Yeah. And it's like,
that was not abandoned. That was that was a block. That was a block in Brooklyn. That's was completely, the whole block was filled up and only 2 of those houses, like 3 of the letters to the left were like a part of the building of the house that I knew the person was there. And the rest of them were completely illegal as fuck.
See, well, yeah, but to your point, that's rad because it's like, it still embodies kind of who you are as a person, but then it attracts attention to the band because they're like, how did they do this?
Yeah, some people notice, some people don't. That's the thing I've realized too. A lot of people have a really short attention span, and I kind of break my back a lot of the time and break everybody else's back in the band a lot of the time. Sometimes it's it goes really unnoticed. But I guess that's just the way art is, though. Like maybe like posthumously, someone one day will be like, "Oh, that kid had a good work ethic and he's pretty smart." But right. Who knows?
Right. Well, I think there's something to that where you approach the way, even though Nothing and Death of Lovers, like there are elements of it that aren't rooted in punk or hardcore, but you're always going to view it through that spectrum. You're going to approach it with that same way that you did for all your your terrible punk bands or whatever. And I presume that kind of bumps people out that don't have experience with punk and hardcore, or have you found that does it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not even that. It's like there's elements of that, but there's also elements of like I have friends in bands that are like from our world that are like different genres, but they're like successful fucking bands, and they like come and ask me for like advice about Lagunitas, please. Thanks, T. And they ask me for like business advice. It's just fucking crazy to me. You know what I mean? Like I have like guys and like I can't say any bands because like
you want to blow up their spot.
I don't. Yeah, but like there's like pretty big bands like if they ask me like part time like help manage them and shit, and then I'm just like, man, I could barely manage my life. Like what the hell are you talking about?
Right. I mean, I'm sure that is kind of funny to you just because you're like, yeah, everything that kind of has happened so far has been by, not accident, but like, I don't know. I don't know why it worked.
Yeah, I don't know why it happened either. It happened for like, it happens because that's what the world is. The world is just this chaotic mess of randomness. It's just like, it's just it doesn't have a plan for anybody. Nothing is planned at all. Everything's chaotic and nothing means anything.
Right. Yeah,
and I think that was the realizing that was the only thing that ever gave me the only time in my life I felt like I ever had an upper hand in anything is until I figured that out.
Right. And going through all of the chaotic stuff that you did with your last record, as far as like with Collect, and then going back to Relapse and stuff like that, was I'm sure it was frustrating because you just had to wait around for your record to get released, for much longer than you originally anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, that was just a fucking mess. That was a bad idea in general. I seen money signs, honestly, to tell you the perfect truth.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about where they were coming from or anything. I just seen dollar signs, and just that's like the, that's the neighborhood coming out of me. I was like, fuck this. That means I don't have to work for a fucking year at least doing this,
Right.
And that was all that was. And I really liked what Jeff Rickley was telling, like spewing. It was good enough, He's like, yeah, we got this. He's like, I got a backer. He's like an Old Thursday fan. He's a financial guy. It's like he works in hedge funds. I was like, I don't even know what the fuck that is. I was like, I don't care. I was like, he's willing to spend this much money on us? Yeah, we're in. Fuck it. And Rennie, our manager, was just like, yo, we should be wary of this. Like, this is really unstable. And I was like, yeah, but look at the money. And he's like, yeah, I feel you. And he's like, well, if you're going to roll the dice, I'll do it. I was like, I've been rolling my dice my whole life. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
Right. What's the worst that can happen?
Anytime I've ever asked myself. All right. Thanks, T. Oh, God.
Are they giving you off-brand beer?
No, it's got something floating in it. I just noticed now. I'm not drinking that shit. Yeah, they gave me the beer that I didn't ask for, of course. There's a shot of Jameson attached to it, though. Yeah. Supposed to DJ at 10 o'clock tonight. It's like I think it's
you got another 5 hours. You better slow down.
I know. Tell me about it.
But yeah, so yeah, like you said, what's the worst that can happen? And then obviously the worst happened.
Yeah. I mean, we got out of it, so it wasn't the worst thing that happened. I mean, it was definitely, and I made a statement immediately when I figured out everything was going on, and I tried to roll the situation in my fucking favor, like I always do. I'm not stupid, I was making a stand, and I was putting ourselves and our band and the record in a really awful position by making a stance on the fact that I'm going to be the first band that's going to say, I'm off this fucking label, I'm not doing this record with this guy. Which kind of bummed a lot of people out on the label because they were like, well, we were going to address this as a whole thing. And I was like, there's nothing to address. I'm not doing it. And that's it, And it kind of put us in a really shitty position. But I also knew that it was important that I did what I did. You know what I mean? It had to be done. There's no ifs and rounds around about it. And it's just because everyone else wants to sit and fucking ponder all these things. Like, I already have it figured out. You know what I mean? I'm not doing a record with him. And fuck this guy. And fuck everybody involved with him. And that was it. And and it wound up working in our favor anyway. Like, people were like, oh, you guys are good guys. I'm like, well.
Yeah, you're like, that was
partially.
Right, that's partially true.
It's partially true, but I also knew that what the fuck was going to happen. It was going to happen to everybody anyway. I could sit here and tell you that I didn't care about any of the shit he was doing. I still couldn't put a fucking record out with him. That wasn't the case, obviously. Like, I have HIV positive friends that, that depend on these kind of medicines that he was inflating and stuff, it's like, but like, that it's not always the case. Like, what was going to happen was going to happen regardless,
Yeah, totally. And you just wanted to distance yourself as far away as you could from it.
Yeah, immediately, because fuck that guy. I hate that shit. I don't like.
Yeah, you don't need that in your life.
No. You think that I relate with any type of shit like that? Like a guy like that?
No way. No, just because he found music that is somewhat tangentially related to nothing doesn't mean you have any similarities to him.
He also fucking knew to keep me out of his fucking mouth too, which is pretty funny. He's sitting there talking shit to Ghostface in that video. Probably knew that I would come look for his fucking ass because I would go stalk his fucking apartment so I see him and beat the shit out of him.
Totally, yeah.
I think he knew it too. I think he knew it. He didn't start a fight with me at all.
Yeah, I love that. And so, like,
rather fuck with Wu-Tang instead.
Yeah, you'd Right. You'd rather mess with people who aren't actually going to
I don't know why you would think to mess with Ghostface, though. Ghostface is a scary guy.
Hell yeah, I wouldn't do that. Most normal people
I asked
wouldn't.
him for a selfie once.
It didn't
at
work
a Vice
out?
party. No, he was like, yeah, all right. And he did the selfie with me, and I tried to take the picture, and my phone fucking didn't have enough storage.
Oh.
So I was like, oh shit! I was like, hold up, I gotta delete a couple things. And he just looked so pissed, but I still got the selfie at him.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. You win on that one.
That was a long time ago. And then I went to some dinner thing the other day, and he was there, and he didn't remember. Thank God. So,
that's amazing. Two last things I want to hit on before I let you go. One of them is the, clearly since you've been doing the, Death to Lovers project now for, quite some time, and, you play shows with it, and you're as active as you can be with it. Is it basically just like super fun to have these two, different but kind of similar projects existing in the world where it's like, yeah, man, it scratches another itch for me.
I mean, I had dreams of Grandeur with this thing, but like Nick, who I wrote the record with Kyle and Sylvan, he's done with touring. He just doesn't want to do it anymore, and like he quit Nothing. He gave his most notice a while ago. It's not like me and him talk every single day. Like it's not nothing bad or anything. It just sucks that we put so much work into that record last night. We can't really. I don't feel comfortable doing it without him. And I really love the project, and I think that has potential to do really well. But that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Well,
maybe in like 30 years. Before North Korea blows us up and like the world is in fire, someone will be like, "Yeah, that was a really good record. We did something with that."
Yeah. And now that Nothing has an established kind of touring base where you can go out and headline and stuff like that. Like, do you enjoy touring now, or is it kind of does it still in certain respects feel an element of work?
Nah, man, I hate touring.
Okay.
I like playing shows, but I hate touring. I hate being away from my dog. I hate being away from my family, friends. But it's a necessity. You can't, I managed to be lucky enough to be playing music for a living now somehow after all this bullshit. I managed to still be walking around and doing what I want to do in the midst of things that I've done to myself and I've done to other people and haven't been stopped yet as a human. And, for better or for worse, I'm here and I'm lucky, in a sense, to be doing what I care about the most as far as like being a human. So I always respect it, whether I like it or not. So that's what you get from me.
Yeah. Well, you recognize that it's an important part of it, but it doesn't have to be your your number one joy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like you would be in an ideal world, you would just basically create music and put out records and play 10 shows a year.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Right. That's okay. Let's see if we can get you there, right?
Yeah, we'll see. I don't foresee that being the case, but I would have never foreseen this happening.
Right. And do you kind of the last thing, and this may be a big question, but do you personally kind of feel, I guess, more stable or rooted now? And you can still live a chaotic lifestyle, but you don't have to feel as like you said, sort of crazy, unbalanced. So where do you kind of feel like you're at now?
I mean, if you ever had to paint an example of me, it would be the visual painting of unbalance in all senses. So, yeah, I feel like I'm way more chilled out until the day that I'm out for 3 days straight and get home and my relationship is fucked up and I don't have enough money in my bank account to pay rent and I don't know, man. Like it's still day-to-day things. It's always just a struggle to deal with what life is giving you and what you're taking from life and what you're dealing yourself in life. I don't think you ever really figure it out. I think it's how little pain you can inflict upon yourself if that's what you're into. I think I like inflicting pain on myself subconsciously sometimes. I must at this point because I know I'm not that dumb. So
right, you're like I'm choosing to make the same mistake over and over again.
Yeah, I mean it's like standing in front of like incoming traffic sometimes and like moving out of the way at the last second. It's not necessarily because I want to not be on this planet, because I have well enough utilities to eliminate myself from the earth. It's more along the lines of like knowing, feeling thinking that you know what everything is about, and just like toying with it sometimes. I think that's kind of like how I fit in.
Right. And last thing I promised was the would you ever play in a hardcore band again?
I think I'm too tired to do that.
Got it. You got have a little more stamina and energy for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's too tiring. I don't think anybody wants to see somebody standing still in a band, so
right.
The nothing stuff is enough for me, I think, at this point.
Right. You're like, I'm exhausted after a nothing set, so you sing and stand still behind a microphone, so
yeah, I'm not as exercised as I was in horror show days.
Right.
Okay, that was it, and that was Nicky, and dude, right? Just a great conversation. I also was really, some of you may, or I get criticism sometimes from people being like, oh, why don't you ask, like, not the most obvious question, but why don't you talk about the thing that everybody talks to that person about? And, it's not phrased that way. But there are certain things like, Nicky has clearly been in jail. He has discussed that in many, many different avenues. And, I didn't want to kind of belabor that point and ask him, oh, dude, what'd you get put into prison for? Like, that stuff is easily Googleable. Googleable. There we go. Blah. But, I wanted to take a little different angle about that. So that's hopefully why you listen to this show is, different discussions, like not the exact same thing that you hear kind of over and over from different avenues. So anyways, what do I got for next week? I've got a great show with a person who I am looking up right now, right? I have a great chat with Stacy Hilt from the Casket Lottery. He also played in Coalesce as well. I just recently had his bandmate, Nathan Ellis from Casket Lottery and Coalesce about a month and a half or 2 months ago. And Stacy actually reached out and was like, dude, I would love to come on the show. And I was like, dude, I would love to talk to you. So it worked out absolutely perfectly. And I'm going to be recording a very, very cool, I wouldn't even call it bonus episode because I'm just going to release it on normal Wednesday. We're going to be doing a myself, Joey and Jeremy, who always, are compatriots of the show, and we always do our year-end best of list, which we, published about 2 months ago or so. We're actually going to be reflecting. We're going to be traveling back in time to 2007, in which we talk about our best of records from that year. Joey came up with the idea, and I think it's going to be very fun to revisit our old best of lists and be like, do these records hold up? Oh man, that record doesn't hold up. Or like, oh no, I don't regret that decision. So it'll be really funny, and we'll be doing that soon. So that's what you got to look forward to. And I hope you right there, I'm talking to you, have a good rest of the day, and please be safe, everybody.
You've been listening to the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, jabberjawmedia.com. Shh.
When the world gets in the way of your music, try the new Bose Quiet Comfort Earbuds 2. Next-gen earbuds uniquely tuned to the shape of your ears. They use exclusive Bose technology that personalizes the audio performance to fit you, delivering the world's best noise cancellation and powerfully immersive sound, so you can hear and feel every detail of the music you love. Bose Quiet Comfort Earbuds 2. sound shaped to you. To learn more, visit Bose.com.